Hello everyone. So this is my Intro to Python course and it's by Akshat. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the agenda for today. So I'll first give you guys a basic introduction of what Python is, then I'll explain what the scripting development environment is, and now we start off with the basics such as variables, what are data types, what are strings, and how we can make dynamic strings through formatting it. So now, let's get an introduction to the course. So what is a programming language? The best way to understand a programming language is understanding what type of applications they have. So we can think of video games, social media platforms such as WhatsApp, Instagram, and others. We can also think about delivery services such as DoorDash and any other dev app or utility that might relate to electronics. So now let's talk about how do people communicate with computers. If you know, computers don't understand English, right? So basically, we have this thing called an interpreter. What an interpreter does is basically retrieves all of your code that you wrote in the syntax of Python, and it basically translates all of that syntax into this language which is called binary code. Binary code is a language that computers speak, and what they consist of are zeros and ones. We give commands to the computer through code, and then it follows the certain syntax and everything. Now let's talk about what the Python scripting development is. You must be thinking, what am I talking about? This seems like such a complex topic, but it's basically the process through which it turns all of our Python code into binary. So let's talk about what Python is. Python is a high-level language which requires it to parse the data into an intermediate language first, and some examples of intermediate languages would be C or bytecode. Then they're used to convert the code into binary. As a result, this process results in the computing time for Python to be much slower. What I mean by this is, imagine we have the same program running on C and on Python. For Python, it might take 0.5 seconds. However, on C, it'll be much faster because it can run in probably 0.2 seconds. Now you might be thinking, why would we want to learn Python then? Well, Python has its own benefits, as we'll find out later in this course. So here's a basic demonstration of what an interpreter is. So we first have our editor, which is right here, and it has all of our code. All of this is then turned into a source file, and now it's going through the Python interpreter. So we first started with the compiler, which turns all of our code into bytecode. Then it goes through the virtual machine, which basically has all the library modules that allow Python to be much more easier to utilize. And then finally, we go to our running program where it basically runs the code and gives you the output that you desire. So let's do our first assignment. Let's print our first string. Inside of the quotes, you can put any sentence and print it. The data type of the value that we're printing right now is a string. As you can see, we have the sentence, hello world, but on the beginning and at the end, we have quotation marks. Okay, so let's start with the assignment. So I already copied down print hello world. Now what we have to do is basically print our own name, okay? So let's do it. So in my case, I would do print Akshat, and let's see the result that we get. Run, and as you can see, it's loading, and what we get printed is the name Akshat. We can test anything else as well, like such as Bob. Let's do that. If we run it, as you can see, 1 second. And as you can see, we get Bob. Perfect. So that's it for that. Now let's get on to the next thing. So now we start talking about what are variables. In programming, a variable is a value that can change depending on conditions or on information passed to the program. So what variables essentially do is store a certain value. We can have basic values such as the number 45, or we can have a string, or even a boolean. However, we can also have complex SQL queries that can store multiple lists and more, which we'll learn later on in this course. So for now, let's just look at these basic examples and understand that we can basically store any type of data, and inside these variables, what they basically do is shadow the item that is stored inside. So whenever we call var, it will always give us the output of 45. Another neat thing about variables is when you want to declare it, which is basically give it a value, we can have it as c equals a plus b. So we know that a equals 4, so we can just treat this as c equals 4 plus b. Then we also know that b equals 5, so we can say c equals 4 plus 5. And we already know what 4 plus 5 is, therefore c equals 9. Now, let's talk about what are data types. Data types are the different types of data that we can store. So the first one is going to be an integer. An integer is any number such as 1, 234, 56,780, as big as you want. However, it's important to know that there is a limit. The limit is 2,147,483,648. So you have to make sure that you don't go past this limit, but if you do need to go past this limit, you can always use this new integer type, which is called a long. Now let's talk about string. A string is basically a collection of characters. Characters are basically the letters in the alphabet, such as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on, right? So an example of a string would be hello world, as we saw in the previous slide. We can also have today, the weather, and others. But an important thing to note is that your string should always have a quotation mark at the beginning and a quotation mark at the end. Now, we're going to talk about what are booleans. Booleans are statements that can either be true or false. And then we have floats, which are essentially integers. However, they can also store decimal values. A shortcoming for integers is that they can only store whole numbers. As a result, floats take care of that issue. Now, let's do some practice. So utilizing variables, we have to create a situation where we're adding two numbers together. And we'll try this with different data types. So now let's get into combining data. So let's get into it. So first, let's just combine two integers together, which will give us a normal result. So we'll say x equals 45 and y equals 12. If you guys do the math, we get 57. Okay, so now let's run it. As you can see, we get 57, which is perfect. Now let's try combining an integer with a string, such as hello. Let's see if we get an error in this. Oh, we get an error. The reason for this is we can't combine integers and strings together. It doesn't really make sense. However, if we put quotation marks around the 45, now let's run it. We get 45 hello. Obviously, this doesn't make sense, but at least it allows for it to be printed. Now let's try combining it with a boolean, such as true. So let's do that. As you can see, we cannot combine other data types with each other. So we can't combine a string with an integer or a boolean, and we can't combine an integer with a string or a boolean. So now, let's start with printing variables, which is just what we did right now. So let's just clarify some things. So first, obviously, we need to assign the variable some value. This can be a string, an integer, or a boolean. As you can see in this example, we declared x to be equal to 45, which in this case would be an integer. I'd highly recommend that you guys do some practice and basically notice that distinctive qualities for each of these data types to really get the hang of it. Then we would need to print a variable using the print function, as you can see here. And remember, if whatever we want to print, we always have to put it inside of the parentheses. As you can see in this case, I put the x inside of the parentheses, and that's the only reason that it printed. So make sure you do that, and now let's get on to the next slide. So now let's see, how can we make a dynamic string? So imagine we want to make a string, but also put a variable inside of it. So imagine we ask the user for an input. We ask them, how old are you? And you want to print, they are this many years old. Obviously, we can't hard code it, which is, I am 50 years old, meaning you already declared a variable and gave it a value without even asking the user. As a result, you won't get an accurate answer, and you can't account for people saying they're 30 years old, and you'll be saying they're 50, right? So what we do is make a formatted string. So how we begin a formatted string is as usual. So we start with our print function, the parentheses, which is here and here, and then the unique thing here is we put an F at the very beginning. Then we put quotation marks and quotation marks at the beginning and the end of the sentence as usual. However, you have to make sure that the F is always outside of the quotation marks to indicate that this will be a formatted string that'll have some variable inside of it. Then we'll obviously write out our sentence as usual. So we'll just say I am years old for now. And after that, wherever you want to put the variable name, you just do braces and closing braces. And inside of the braces, you want to put the variable name. In this case, we hard-coded it to where age is equal to 46. So when we print this out, we will get I am 46 years old. So now, let's talk about how we can take an input from the user. So the basic syntax to take input from a user is we write out the variable name, which is always on the left-hand side of the equal sign, and on the right-hand side, we store the value. So the first thing we have to do is decide the input that we get from the user, what type of input it's going to be. Is it going to be a string, an integer, a float, bool, whatever, right? So we first write out that. However, rather than writing out this whole full form, Python has simplified things where you only have to write a 3-word for str, indicating that it's a string. For integers, all you have to write is int. And for a boolean, all you have to write is bool in this area. Then we want to do parentheses, as what we're basically doing here is typecasting, telling the code what type of data type this is going to be. Then inside of the parentheses that we have, we want to put this function, which is a built-in library from Python, where we say input, and inside of the input we put parentheses and the question that we want to ask them. So you must be thinking, wow, this is so easy. However, it has a major flaw in this method, as it doesn't account for the possibility of getting an incorrect input from the user. Now you must be wondering, what do I mean by this? What I mean is, imagine that you're expecting an integer, let's say. So we're expecting a number between the range of 1 to 50. However, the input that the user gives us is hello world. Obviously, our code is going to be very confused, saying, what is this? I thought we were expecting an integer, right? As a result, it can result in your code crashing many times. Obviously, we'll fix this problem later on in the course, but for now, this is a simple way to get the input. Let's take an example. So let's say we want to ask the user how old they are. So on the left-hand side, we have the variable name, then equal sign, and on the right-hand side, we have the value that's being stored inside of var. So when we talk about age, it's always going to be a number, meaning that we need an integer. As you can see, we have int, then parentheses, and inside of the parentheses, we first write input, which is the built-in Python library, and then another set of parentheses inside of which we put the question that the user will see. Now, Take your time and try to solve this out. I'll shortly do it. So first, let's talk about what this question is asking us. What is the user's favorite country? So we'd obviously have to ask the user what their favorite country is, meaning we need an input. So let's get on to it. So now let's get into how we're gonna get the input of the favorite country. So first we have to think to ourselves, what type of data type is an input of a country going to be? So let's take an example, such as Switzerland. So I would think that is a word, meaning it would be a string. So for now, I'll put this as str, and then inside, I put input, right? And inside the input, I put the sentence that I want to ask the user. So in this case, I'll ask them, what is your favorite country? Question mark. Perfect. So we're going to be storing this input into the variable called favorite underscore country. Now what we have to do is basically print a formatted string. So we first start off with our print function, and inside of the print we put f and then the quotation marks. Make sure to do that because that's a very important step. Then we say user's favorite country is, and then what is our variable name? It is favorite underscore country. So what I'll do is braces, and inside of the braces I'll do favorite underscore country. Perfect. Now let's print this and see if it's working. What's your favorite country? So I'm gonna say, let's just say Egypt. And you can see that we get the print statement of user's favorite country is Egypt. Perfect. So that's how you'd approach this problem. Now, let's do the final assignment for this week. So, ask the user for their name and birthday, and then print them out as formatted strings. So what this means is we probably have to get the user's name, then their birthday, and then we have to finally utilize a formatted string to piece all of these things together into one big coherent sentence. So let's go do that. Alright, so I started this off with the name of our variables. So the first name is going to be, the first variable name is going to be the name of the user. Then the second is going to be the birthday of the user. So first let's start off with the name. So what type of input data type would a name be? I would say a string. However, other people might argue, so yeah. Then we put the input inside of the str braces, and then we put the question, what is your name? Perfect. Now, let's get on to a birthday. Sure, we have numbers for a birthday. However, let's think of it like this. 07/14/1921, There's going to be slashes in between, which would return to us as an error for the code. So what we basically have to treat it as is a birthday is also a string. Okay? So a string, then the standard input, and then the question, when's your birthday? Now, we have to print all of this out into a formatted string. So print, then the F, quotation marks, and inside of this we'll say, we'll first start off with the braces, and what is the name of the user? Well, we're storing the name of the user inside of this variable called name. So let's put the braces and inside name. Name's birthday is on, and when is his birthday? When is their birthday, is better to say. Well, their birthday is stored inside of this variable called birthday. So let's do braces and inside birthday. Now, let's go test this out and see if it's working. So let's say Charles, and their birthday, let's say it's on June 21st. Charles' birthday is on June 21st. As you can see, it worked out perfectly. Now, I would like you guys to review this video once more and make sure that you understand everything, or if you have any confusions, make sure to leave some comments down below and I'll be happy to answer them. See you guys in the next one.